Today's guest is Will Manel. He is a competitive strategy director at Peraton and a graduate of the ACT-IAC Voyagers Leadership Development Program in 2021, which is really how we've crossed paths in that fellows community. Thanks for joining me today, Will.
Thanks for joining me and having me on. I think we actually also met through Dave Hernandez and his, his mini leadership group.
Yeah, the mini one on his back porch. Yes.
Yeah, of course, of course.
So for those who haven't met you, I had a chance to have a drink with you and hang out with you. Actually, let's fix your camera before we go.
Oh, again?
You did it, yeah.
All right, is this?
Focus. There we go. I think it's there. There we go. We're in focus. All right, I'll ask that question again. It's going to be fun. All right. For those who have not had a chance to hang out with you, have a drink with you, chat with you, talk a bit about your background, where you're from, who you are, and what you do.
Sure. So I'm actually a Canadian native. I'm from the frozen north, a couple hours north of Toronto. My mom remarried a U.S. Marine, and we moved here in 1995. And then it was just base to base, the traditional military brat story, right? And I like to think that that was kind of the genesis of how I got here. When you're going from place to place and trying to figure stuff out and fit in, and you're always sort of that off piece. I was constantly digging into everything. I ran away from home a couple times to try to get to school. When I wasn't allowed in, I actually successfully got onto the bus and got into first grade at almost 5 years old. They had one less lunch than they were expecting, and that's when I got found out. So I've always been someone who wants to dig into things and understand what's going on and just know as much as I can. Kind of the more direct path here, I was actually on a tag agreement to UC Santa Cruz, excuse me. I almost said Santa Barbara. UC Santa Cruz to do marine biology. And my dad at the time was the Presidio commander for DLI, the Defense Language Institute, where they train the linguists and the diplomats and that kind of a thing. So they have a space aid program where when they do their funding procurements, maybe this is something that we're going to change about the industry. They buy 100 slots of Chinese linguists, only 80 guys qualify. So they open it up to so the captain's wife can speak Japanese when they move overseas, that kind of a thing. So I got into that program actually right before my parents moved off base. So I had to find housing and just figure it out. And I took this course. It was a year of intensive study, but I gained professional proficiency with Mandarin Chinese. And then I just moved to Beijing. I figured what better way to do it, just make a decision, what's a better way for me to consolidate my skills than to just go in country and figure it out. So I took an internship in Beijing working with the U.S. Commercial Service. We were a small business that would connect like your Oklahoma widget factory with somewhere in China to do that sort of market entry work. So there was the cultural angle, there's the doing research on them and also the client, meeting expectations. I was like a pig in mud. I really enjoyed that. I ended up leaving that job and coming back because my grandfather, who really raised me when I was a kid, my father figure, he passed unexpectedly. And I spent about a year just living in their house, going through stuff, figuring it out. Totally lost my direction. Didn't know what I was going to do. Came back here to DC. Where my parents had set up for my dad's Twilight tour at the Pentagon. I was just sort of crashing for a couple of months. I did a language consultancy thing where all the FSOs, I would tutor them to get them ready for their exams and research. That didn't really pan out. I did some temp staffing. And I remember thinking, I wish I could get a job where I had a badge. I saw people walking around with all these badges.
Right.
I think that's a real job. So my goal was to get a job with a badge. And I finally found a company that took me on. I got a job with a badge. It was great. I had my little access card, my little data watch. I was like, I finally made it. And they're like, well, what you got to do is you got to get one where you have, PTO and, all these other benefits. I was like, okay, well, that's the next goal. That's the next thing for me to do. So it's just been kind of moving from company to company, starting in small business in DHS, actually, right before Eagle 2 came out. So it was a great time to be a small business guy, working with IBM. I grew up under Tony Sacco, who you may know from the Circo days. So he taught me a ton. I'm really grateful to him for telling me what an RFP was. I had no idea coming in. I was just like, look, I'll figure it out. I can Google like anybody else. But, he sort of showed me the procurement life cycle, how you treat people, how you make those connections. He got me hooked up with Bob Connors. I was at a company called Neom IT. And Bob Connors was at Army Tatric. He was big into healthcare, and he looked really, really close to my grandfather. It was actually a startling view, and he and I got on like hotcakes. So I got really interested in that, kind of left DHS behind and moved into healthcare. I found out that I really, really enjoyed it as my grandmother was, going into senior care, and there was a personal tie to the mission, right? So I found a company, MSc, Medical Science and Computing, that got bought out by Dovell and then later Lighthouse. Second great mentor, Greg Davis, absolute monster in the space. I think he's at Booz Allen now. Very, very intense atmosphere. Honestly, I think that he saw the energy that I bring to things and the excitement that I can get around stuff. I wasn't ready. I was like, I'll figure it out. I can make it happen. I wasn't ready. And, after a year, honestly, he fired me. Probably the best thing he could have done. He was like, look, you need to figure it out. You need to grow up in the space. We'll figure it out as time goes on. That was first reality check for me, never having been fired before. And taking a little time to reset and think about what do I do. So I moved to another NIH-centric company, back to start, developing templates, processes, working with advanced VPs, trying to manage up more. It was a really big growing experience for me. And so I'm very thankful that he did it. I can't think of someone who's more effective than Greg in the space. So, he's my second great big mentor in the space. Moved from there to Leidos, where I was doing a lot of work with NOAA, with NASA, and these scientific missions, sort of pretending that I was still in the STEM program that I left behind almost 8 years ago. Now I went to UDC at night. I got a degree in management information systems because, you're 6-8 years in the space. People are like, we want to promote you. You don't have a degree. I had taken courses here and there. I did a summer program at Harvard. I did some right-of-way courses to a college in Athabasca, Alberta, Canada, way out where I've never been. And, it was just one of those things where you've got to make a decision of what do I need to do to get to the next step? Do that functional decomposition, break it down, just take it one bite. So, night school, working 10 hours, then going to school for 4 hours. I was exhausted for a full year, 2 years actually, but very, very happy to get the degree sorted out in management information systems. So now I've got that box check. Now it's like, well, have you thought about an MBA? Have you thought about going to get something, have you thought about a graduate certificate from Georgetown? And so that's the next thing on my radar. Since leaving Leidos to Peraton, it was really an evolution of what I like doing, which is digging into the stuff and getting the pieces together and figure out how it all fits together. I have this branding digital raccoon because I feel like there's a little raccoon just like moving my human suit around inside, but he wants to dig into the trash and find the good stuff that's in there. And the role at Peraton that I didn't know I was actually interviewing for. I was just talking to this guy, Mark Deshawn, my third, really big mentor. He's like, what do you like about your job? I'm not hiring for anything. We just had a conversation through a mutual friend. And I was like, well, I really like the capture stuff, but it's basically project management. And I really like getting to like the philosophical overarching things. How does it work down into the pieces? I don't want to manage the throughput as much as I want to. What's the story? What's the movie pitch? What are we doing here? Patrick Sisk actually is our class mentor on the government side. And he would constantly yell at me in the program, stop being such a philosopher. Just do what's in front of you. I was like, yeah, but like, we got to think about why we're here. I'm like, what's the purpose? What's the strategy? And he's like, strategy jobs exist. And I was like, well, no one's doing that really. I mean, there's a couple like, maybe your Deloitte's or a Grant Thornton, the consultants, like the OG consultants, right? But large SIs, you're just a BD. BD becomes a capture. Capture becomes a capture executive, a VP of capture. And I just didn't see that being where I wanted to go. So he said, look, do you want a job? And I was like, well, if it's doing this work, absolutely 100%. So I came over and I've really loved the work that I'm doing here. We're taking the CEO vision because Stu Shea, who actually built Leidos before he went over there, I actually came over. It was my first intro with him. He's like, oh, Leidos. I was so, all these people. Taking his, he's got that Willy Wonka, huge mega thinking ability of just pulling stuff seemingly out of the air and making it work. I really admired that sort of broadness of mind, translating that into, hey, capture manager, this is what we're looking at. I understand it's hours, it's staffing, it's, checking the box for meeting with the customer, the shaping, the white papers, but what is the purpose of what you're doing, and how are you going to take not the requirements? The requirements are going to get you like a compliant bid, but understand the business driver behind that. How do you get to a competitive bid? How do you get to a compelling bid where like they have to choose you? You're the only one.
Right.
That is something that I've really, really enjoyed. I do workshops, I do, structured template stuff, I build all kinds of crazy stuff. Um, and I'm really thankful that the company's really supportive. I actually got to just rotate it off of a TDY on a NASA program because I was like, I kind of want to go do a delivery thing. As you're getting at this level, they're like, have you done finance? Have you delivered P&L?
Right.
It's like, I barely scrape by my accounting courses. That's an attention to detail thing. Let me do the delivery instead. And it was great learning about, the deep space network, the near space network that we're doing on Sense, coordinating the first and the last communications to the astronauts going to the ISS. Like those are missions that matter.
Yeah.
And so now I'm back at corporate. I'm just, taking it day by day, getting things done, making those CEO bids, hopefully win.
Yeah. So, like you, I did college while working. How, Now, how was that? I mean, did you find it extremely difficult to do that, or did you find your company understanding as you were doing that?
Yeah, my company was very understanding. I actually was in between two different companies. So we started at one and I ended at the other. Um, a lot of it was really just like, where do I start as an adult student? Like, I ended up going to UDC, HBCU,
Yeah.
feeling good. But it was just down the street from my house in DC. So I was like, look, I could figure out Georgetown, I could figure out these applications, but I'd done that before and I really didn't want to do it again. So I was like, look, let me just get this thing done. Did the coursework, charted out. I had a little Gantt chart that I've got in my Google Drive there somewhere. And then I was just like, look, it's another part of work. These are the things that I got to do to meet this quarter, to meet this year, to get this done. The stuff itself actually wasn't as hard doing the work. I think it was really being able to pivot between, I'm a BD executive by day, laying it out, putting the harsh facts, being aggressive in conversations with the people and saying, look, this sucks, but here's how you fix it. Right. And then going to a college environment where kids are just like figuring it out for the first time, do you have worksheets for homework? It's just kind of like at once it's kind of chill, but also it's a really big gear shift when you're going from 5 o'clock to a 5:30 class.
Right.
You're on the phone dialing as you're running to get to class. It was just a big, big energy suck.
Yeah, that's rough. I remember I did that many years ago. I did that while I had 3 kids and a job. I somehow managed to finish college.
Just a dog and a cat for us so far. So, I don't have that extra burden to bear.
Yeah. So, I mean, as you've gone through your career, and you've had very interesting dynamic career, what's something you've seen that you were like, man, I really just don't like the way we do that. I wish we did it differently. And if we came to you today, Will, and we said, Will, you now have the power to either make a change or at least make us consider the change, what might it be?
For me, I wish I had the sort of easy charisma that, you've had Sav and Joseph on, Cody's another great example, Cody Merck, Christina, folks who were actually in my Voyagers class as well. Being able to just have a conversation, have that flow go, for me, it's so easy to, get up into that stratosphere and we're talking about this and it ties to this and this, and people just, the eyes glaze over. And I'm like, now I know how it feels when I'm talking to an engineer. They're like, oh, on this network diagram goes this routing protocol in here, and my eyes start to glaze over. So that's for me. But I think for the industry, coming from a small business background, I really wish that we had, and I proposed this, an RFI library across government. So many times when I would have to write an RFP, they're like, cut and paste it from the other one, they never read it. And like, we have to build something. Like we have, I'm writing it by hand for each line, putting my BD intel. I talked to this person, I got this done, and it never went anywhere. And it was so frustrating and discouraging as a small business. And then as a large, it's like, look, we got boilerplate. We're writing our solution elements. Here's the win things we want to validate, because you're approaching it from a different perspective. Smalls are like, please pick us. We're qualified rule of 2. largers are just trying to get feedback on capture win themes, right? On solution elements. Hey, here's how you would do this. By the way, we also have done that on ABCDEFG programs, so it'd be nice if the government was like, I'm looking for cloud, or I guess the zero trust is the big thing, right? AIML, zero trust. What's out there? Pull all that stuff in and make a more informed decision. I think GSA actually had one when Doc Herman was at Octo, or Ecto, excuse me, where they had this collaborative statement of work where they put it, I think, in GitHub or something. And like people just wrote in the pieces, they commented on it. The government's like, here's what we're thinking. And people just sort of like opted out of the procurement throughout the process. And then all the bidders were on the same page. It was a really simple acquisition. I mean, it saves you a bunch of time. You can actually have the technicals doing the work, right? There's that huge disconnect between capture manager is going to promise the moon and then delivery is like, I got a bucket.
Yeah. Right.
So I would love to have that sort of collaborative thing where, kind of like what we do in ACT-IAC, right? We want to have a safe space to work together because we're all working on the same mission. We're all doing the same stuff. I know there's beltway bandits and stodgy government DMV employees, but like, we're all just trying to get the mission done.
Right.
So let's find a way to work together.
That's an interesting thought. Like, I would even go one step further. I like your idea and say, why is it that every government agency seems to believe they're the only person that has this requirement? And why are we not leveraging, why are we not leveraging responses, like you said?
Yeah.
So collect responses from a variety of RFIs instead of asking over and over and over again for the same stuff. Like when I was in the consulting realm, I get completely what you're talking about, where I'd see like 6 different RFIs asking for the same thing, and I somehow have to customize it slightly so they don't know that I used the same text for all 5 of them. That's an interesting idea. And then, and then more collaboration, right? I think,
Right.
I mean, RFIs are meant to be, well, no, they're not really collaborative. I know what I've done in the past, like
They're aspirationally, right?
yeah, from the government side, what I usually try to do, or I have done in the past, is an industry day with the end of the day announcement that now we're putting out an RFI based on the conversation we had today.
Sure.
And that way the RFI is even further informed because we had a conversation, right? Where people
You
can
don't
ask
like just doing the
questions.
chorus line where you take the business cards, you're like, I don't know who these people are. They just keep throwing cards at me.
Yeah. But it's interesting. It's a really interesting idea that further illustrates sometimes the inefficiencies we have, never in government, but
You're an agency that doesn't have a lot of smalls, right? You could find a small if I'm at NIH and the VA is looking for someone. Well, maybe on the VA they have the SDVOSB thing, but maybe HUD or somewhere, right? Hey, you guys are doing. Could you come and talk to us and just give us, a quick demo, a brown bag lunch or something, under $20, whatever the limit is now. I don't know what it is now. I thought it was $20, but just have a conversation. And there'd be so many more opportunities, not only for the vendors, but also for government to get stuff done. Because I'm sure it's a huge, emotional drain for you guys as well.
Yeah, I think you and I are both participants in ACT-IAC, not just the leadership development programs, but they have a lot going on. And I think the ability to call government's attention to some of that material would also equally answer questions before they ask them, and also highlight the people who wrote those white papers and educational materials for government's use would help them have a kind of an idea of the scope. Because sometimes RFIs aren't about the question we're asking as much as it is about trying to get a feel for, are there companies in this space who are going to be able to execute, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Or maybe you get a hit list of those what are the innovation fellows or whatever they rotate in for a year or something.
Yeah.
That could be a great source to find those people too. I mean, get the people who are actually building this stuff, right?
That's interesting. So, Will, what do you have coming up in the new year?
Well, like I said, I just finished this TDY at NASA end of November, and then just sort of like cycling back in. And then the holiday happened. So the most recent thing for me is I just picked up some additional other duties as assigned for our internal growth academy. So it's really, BDs and capture managers, you're so heads down in the trench on this deal, and it's coming in 3 months. We've got to do X, Y, and Z and find a PM and blah, 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 blah. But really just not only doing the traditional PMO, here's our acquisition process and follow this and do this template and whatever, but really getting into that. What's your movie pitch, man? Help us understand the story. Because if you can tell a story, right?
Right.
That's how people communicate. I think where's is the book in here? I think I have it somewhere. I've got Radical Candor. I've got Future Leadership. No, I can't. I don't have it here. It's somewhere else. But there's a great book about how humans we interpret information via stories, and that's why we loved books. We love songs. We love movies even more. And now video games. Right? You're in the story. Those are things that I think are really the way to make your proposal go from a compliant bid that we checked all the boxes and we're lowest price to like, hey, we heard you. We understand you guys have this SharePoint thing or a unique requirement or a geographical whatever. We built that in. It's already in there. And so you, as the government, feel taken care of. We feel like our P-win goes up. Everybody wins, and the taxpayer doesn't feel like as they're reading the Wall Street Times or whatever it is. Jet costs $40 billion more than expected. I think there's a better alignment with the mission. And I'm just really fortunate that Peraton is investing in that to really make sure these missions get done right.
Well, Will, I've always enjoyed getting together with you. Look forward to our next hangout when there's no longer snow on the ground.
Yes. Yeah, I got some out there somewhere.
But thank you so much for coming on the podcast today.
Thanks for having me again. Appreciate it.